21. Truthfully, there's probably tons of pastors across the nation going to be speaking from John 20 and 21. Happens to be a week after Easter. That's what we're going to be talking about, some appearances that Jesus did after he rose from the grave. It's just appropriate to talk about that today. We'll get back into Matthew next week. I'm hoping to try to finish up Matthew like this summer. I know it seems like we're going slow, but Matthew's just so chock full of cool stuff, and so I don't want to motor over it, but I'm excited to get to like another book of the Bible too. That's how I want to do things. Quick, also shameless plug for Thursday night Bible study. We do some pretty cool stuff there with Old Testament stuff, and not that we'll never do Old Testament on a Sunday morning, but that's been fun too, and that was hard to miss that stuff too. I'd call Betty and be like, just make sure you tell them this and make sure, you know. Yeah, I'm sure you guys did. I'm sure things run just fine without me. Yeah, it's like there's that little thing in you that goes, I don't want the train to completely go off the course, but, you know. No, anyway, it's fine. So we're going to be in John 20, 21. We're going to talk about some surprise appearances. When I think of surprise appearances, sometimes a surprise appearance is really great, right? Like I think of these. Some of my favorite videos are when these soldiers come home, the men and women come home from serving, and sometimes they surprise their loved ones, and you get these reunions like that, or where they're just surprised and they're just immediate tears and all that kind of stuff. Those appearances are so fun. Family, and I know that gut-wrenching feeling in your heart when somebody you love is serving and they're away for a long time. And not only that, but especially if they're deployed and it's dangerous where they're at. Oh man, every day for those people, they're feeling it. They're feeling it. So to get to see them, that kind of appearance, especially when it's a surprise, is fun. But then there's bad appearances or bad surprise appearances. One of my most hated ones always when I was working construction was the good old boss showing up at lunchtime. Oh my goodness. If you're a boss, don't go at lunchtime unless you're bringing pizza or something like that, right? But especially when I was foremaning jobs, how do you say that? That's not a verb. When you're a foreman, what would be the verb for that? When you're foremaning? A job, when the boss shows up at lunch, the other guys can still just sit and eat their lunch, but you got to talk to the boss and explain how the morning's been going, and you end up losing your lunch. I used to hate that. So yeah, if you're a boss, don't show up at lunch unless you bring pizza. But I think of something that is about appearances. Just one of the most riveting appearances I've ever. It was in a movie that I saw depicting this appearance. Anybody know who Brendan McDonough is? Anybody that name ring a bell? Brendan McDonough was the only survivor of the horrible tragedy that happened to the Granite Mountain Hotshots several years back. The guys that were fighting the fire. There's a movie about it called Only the Brave, I think. This is the real guys posing in front of a tree. 19 guys perished in fighting a fire. They got surrounded by it. And they deployed they had these like tent-looking things that keeps them a little bit safe, but not when the fire is that bad. And these guys all perished there. Well, this guy Brendan, he survived it because he was up scouting up the hill or something, so he wasn't part of the group. Well, so not only is he dealing with the weight and emotion of losing all his buddies, but then he goes back to where the wives are. They kind of all congregated and kind of met at wives and girlfriends of these guys and met in a cafeteria someplace, and they're all dealing with it. But they didn't know the exact details yet. They just knew that only one guy survives. And in the movie, it portrays it really well. You just get that sinking, guttural feeling. He's already dealing with so much. But when he walks into the room, immediately his presence lets everybody else know that their loved one has perished. And so talk about the absolutely unwelcome feeling you could possibly have, because everybody looks at you and begins to just start weeping, you know? Like, what a great appearance that must have been. Must have been horrible. But today we're going to talk about appearances. In fact, the name of this message is 3 Appearances, 1 No-Show. 3 appearances, 1 no-show. And I'm going to do everything in threes today. So each appearance we'll talk about 3 highlights from each one. And you'll see it'll move by pretty quick. 3 appearances, 1 no-show. The first one is from John 20, 11 through 18. It's Mary Magdalene. Let me read you this one. This one would have happened last week when we're celebrating Easter. Um, they go to the tomb. They see it. They see that he's gone. We don't know exactly the timetable when Mary is there by herself. I think there's something precious. We don't know for sure, but I think there's something precious about Jesus showing up to her first. There's something about Jesus is going, I'm going to go and see everybody. But I want to show up to her first. I don't know why. It's just really, it's precious. But let's read it. If you're following with me, we're in John 20, starting in verse 11. But Mary was, of John, by the way. But Mary was standing outside the tomb weeping. And so as she wept, she stooped and looked into the tomb. And she beheld two angels in white sitting, one at the head and one at the feet, where the body of Jesus had been lying. And they said to her, Woman, why are you weeping? And she said to them, Because they have taken, can you imagine the pain as she says this? Because they've taken away my Lord, and I don't know where they have laid him. And when she had said this, she turned around and beheld Jesus standing there and did not know it was Jesus. Pretty interesting. Jesus says to her, Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking? Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away. You get this idea, like, just tell me where he is. Can you just tell me where he's at? And Jesus said to her, Mary. And she turned and said to him in Hebrew, Rabboni, which means teacher. Here's what I love about this real quick. She figures out who it is when he says her name. We're going to talk about that. But I love how John goes, it's as if there wasn't even time for John to write, and she embraced Jesus. John goes right to, Jesus said to her, Stop clinging to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. But go to my brethren and say to them, I ascend to my Father and your Father, and my God and your God. And Mary Magdalene came announcing to the disciples, I've seen the Lord, and that he had said these things to her. I just picture, like, John can't, at the end of the time to write, like, oh, and she immediately lunged at Jesus to hug him, which is what we'd all do, right? It just got right to Jesus. I think probably even laughingly being like, yo, I'm not ready for all the hugs yet, I just think that had to have been a cherished time. So let's talk about three highlights just from this. Now, part of what I'm hoping that happens today is that Holy Spirit, I've got three highlights for each three stories, and my hope is that I'm just throwing lots of darts out there. Like, I'm hoping the Holy Spirit may not get you with the first point, but he might get you with the second or whatever. I think everybody's going to hear something they need to hear this morning, but I'm just going to be throwing them out there and see where they land, okay? So let's go for it. Three highlights from this story. The very first one, as I already mentioned, is that he calls her name. He calls her name. That's when she recognizes him. There's a preciousness to that. I don't even know the depths of it. I'm not even going to try to explain the depths of it, except to say that I believe the Holy Spirit has sent me this morning to tell you that some of y'all need to hear him say your name today. Now, here's the problem. I'm not going to go into like what that means. I don't even know how he would do it with you. That stuff's not for me to worry about. I just think that some of you need to hear that. And I think some of you will hear it when you quiet down. When you take some moments to be quiet, to rest, to listen, stillness. You see what I'm saying? Some of us are just are you allowed to say dang in church? Some of us are so dang busy. Just clutter. And you're sitting here and going, I would love to hear Jesus just say my name and just I recognize him and I calm down. But I think you just need to go, hey, everybody, I'm going in the other room and I'm going to sit quietly and I'm just going to sit and I'm going to wait. I know, as a guy, for me at least, sitting and waiting, Gretchen can tell you how impatient a person I am. That's not easy to do, but I've been getting better at doing it. And I'm going to tell you guys something. Maybe my track record's really good. I don't know. But every time I decide to sit and wait, it doesn't take that long. I begin to hear things. I begin to hear clearly in my mind how my thoughts are battling for this is a dumb thought, this is a good one. We all go through that. But at some point, I start to begin to hear him. I don't know how it all works, and I don't know how it works for you, but some of you guys just need to be quiet to hear that name. Okay? That's an easy one. Number two, first witness, a woman. This is huge. Now, some of you guys may already know this, but here's a couple profound things, okay? This is a huge, huge apologetic for the fact that this really did happen in history. If Jesus didn't raise from the dead, and if what we have is authors who have penned this to fake everybody out, okay? This is, in other words, if it's not true, it's false, which means somebody is screwing around with us or whatever. They would never back then in that time chosen the first person to witness anything to be a woman. Women didn't have that kind of respect back then. At least their word of mouth was not respected. I think women were respected a lot more than we give credit to back in that culture. There's evidences of that with how Paul deals with women and things like that. Doesn't matter. The fact is, she becomes the first preacher too, because she goes back and tells everybody about Jesus. So don't tell me that women don't have a voice, right? That's this God himself uses a woman first to tell the news. Okay? That's awesome, and it's precious to me. But it's also incredible that that's part of our. You have somebody go, that's a bunch of hooey. Say, well, then why did they pick a woman to do that? Why did they pick a woman that wouldn't have fit with society? It just wouldn't. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. Number three highlight. I love the fact that he asks her, "Why are you crying?" It's reminiscent of the garden. Going back again to the garden. Remember when they've sinned and they're hiding from God? In Genesis 3:9, God says, "Where are you?" Okay, just take a second here. Why would God ever ask us anything? The whole idea of asking a question is to gain information, yes? It's to gain information. If I ask you a question, you probably can figure I don't know the answer to it, right? Well, why would I ask if I know the answer? Why does God ask anything? Why did he ask them in the garden? Why does Jesus ask Mary, "Why are you crying?" Did you think really that Jesus didn't know why she was crying? Why does he ask? Why does he ask? And I'm going to tell you, I think it's because he invites us to dialogue with him. He invites us to share our hearts with him. Do you know, I think that this could be heretical, so be ready. No, I think as I've been studying more and more, it's as if God owns everything, right? Because he's created everything. Everything belongs to him. But he allows himself to be missing one thing. It's your heart. He allows that to be something you give to him. He doesn't have everybody's hearts. Does that make sense? So when he asks questions, he is literally inviting you, bidding you to come share something with him that he doesn't have. In a way, however that works theologically. Okay? But that's what I think is so precious about him asking Mary, "Why are you crying?" He bids her to share her heart. I love that. I love that. You guys, some of you need to hear that and be sharing your heart. Honest prayers. God, I'm frustrated right now. You know how many times I've prayed that? I am frustrated. I can't be mad at you because you're God and all. But I'm mad, and I don't like your plan right now. Have you ever just prayed that? Maybe I'm only one. Let's move to the next story. Here's the second appearance. It's Thomas in John 20, 26 through 29. Let me read you this story. He missed, apparently he's missed one of the times. I'm skipping over some of the appearances, by the way. This is just a second one I decided to talk about. He's missed one of the times, apparently, that Jesus came. So now they're convened again, and it says after 8 days, so roughly around where we're at now, this would have been roughly a week later. After 8 days, again, his disciples were inside, and Thomas with them this time. Jesus came. This is so weird how John writes this. I can never read this very well. Jesus came And the doors having been shut, and stood in their midst, and said, Peace with you. Somebody should edit that. Then he said to Thomas, Reach here your finger, and see my hands, and reach here with your hand, and put them in my side, and be not unbelieving, but be believing. And Thomas answered him and said, My Lord, my God. I love that. I love that. So let's talk about three highlights just from this story, okay? Number one, doubt doesn't stop Jesus. Doubt doesn't. Jesus was not like frustrated at Thomas. Come on, Thomas, don't you get it? No, it didn't stop Jesus from pursuing Thomas. I love that. Your doubt, your skepticism, that's not stopping Jesus from pursuing you. It's not stopping him. Number two, Jesus understands the materialist. Jesus understands the materialist. He gets it. He understands that there are people that are just their mind works better in proof and observation. They're the scientists of society. The materialist is the one who doesn't really believe that there's spiritual things going beyond what we can see and hear and taste and touch, all those things. That's what a materialist is. So they don't really believe in spiritual things. Partly because we can't really prove those things. You know, they're outside of the ability to show what's going on. This doesn't scare Jesus at all. Doesn't deter him. He comes right up. He doesn't even give Thomas like a big message, right? Like, oh, Thomas, you know, you almost hear, you know, come on, what do you think? Everybody's fooling around here. Here I am, man. Don't you get it? He doesn't even say anything. He just goes, "Come on, Thomas, here." I love that. I love that. Number three, scars are cool. Scars are cool. Look, you guys have heard that. You've heard that said before. I'm proud of my scars. I got tons of them. I used to sit right where Preston's sitting right now. Back a long time ago, my kids were no higher than this. I had four of them sitting with me, and my daughters used to sit on either side of me, and they would hold my hand. And one of my daughters, one time, I could feel her like tapping my hand. And what she told me later is that she was counting the scars on my hands. Now, if you ever look closely at my hands, I have tons of scars all over. I've worked in glass for 25 years. So I have some doozies, some I'm really proud of. I got stories behind a lot of them, you know. And they used to sit there and just count them. I have probably 20 on each hand. Scars are cool. I have tons of scars on my knees. I've had 5 massive major knee surgeries. So I have scars on my knees. I'm proud of those, you know. But here's why scars are cool. Here's why scars are cool. Is we often minister much more from our scars than from our education or our knowledge. Part of the difficulty with being, say, a pastor like myself is I have a Bible degree. I study the Word. I believe God gives me wisdom. But the truth is, I pastor better out of the horrible trials of my life, my scars, my heart scars. When one of you guys is hurting, I can feel that hurt with you. I can be with you. I can come alongside you. You know what? You know what happens with people who have gone through the garbage of stuff? Is they're able to talk to you. Let's say you lose somebody. Let's say somebody dies and it's just tragic, right? You can always tell the person who either didn't go through that or maybe they've been protected for something like that, because often they want to come alongside you and start giving you advice right away. They want to start saying, you know, hey this or hey that. Or they'll try to give you the Christian pat answers. Well, God's got a plan. Well, God's always good. All these things. Look, all those things may be right? That's not the point. The point is when you've gone through something hard, you know that during that time, you're not hearing anything. You just need somebody to come up near you and hug you and hold you and just keep their mouth shut, right? At the most, maybe like, hey, let's get this through together. I got your back. Those types of things. But you're not ready. In the middle of the heat of that trial, you're not ready. You're not ready for that. To me, going up to somebody and being and spouting off all this great wisdom when they're going through it, that would be like seeing somebody hit by a truck. They've got broken arms, broken legs. They're bleeding out all over the place. And going up to him being like, it's okay. There's lots of medical stuff that'll fix you now. Like, are you kidding? This person needs immediate medical attention, not your like nice ideas, right? They're nice ideas. They may be true, but they're not working, right? We often minister better from our scars and our pains and our trials. God knows this. You know it. Doesn't mean we want to just invite them. Lord, I'd really like to go through another trial so I can help that person. No, like I'm not. I'd still. My prayers are still, Lord, help everything to go just smoothly. Let me, put the red carpet out for me. That would be great. I'd rather have that. But you guys understand what I'm saying. If you're going through something or have gone through something, boy, you're prime. You're prime to be a great minister to somebody else. And often ministering to somebody else really, it heals your heart. It really does. It's amazing. Um, next one. Next one's going to be from John 21. This is just to set the story up. This is one of my favorite stories. This is where all the guys have seen him now. And for some reason, we get this story where Peter says to him, oh, I'm going fishing. Let's go. I'm kind of, a lot of scholars believe that they're basically like, well, we don't know what to do now. So I guess we'll go back to doing what we used to do. Especially Peter. You guys need to know that what Peter did when Peter denied Christ 3 times, to the Jewish mindset, was every bit as an act of betrayal and maybe even worse than what Judas did. He, in that moment, disowned his rabbi, disassociated with his rabbi. In a sense, being like, I'm done, is what he did. This wasn't just an act of fear. This was, I'm cutting myself off. That's how he would have been seen. So for Jesus to show up on the beach, and they're out there fishing, they're out all night, they catch nothing. Sounds like a story from the beginning of when Jesus started ministry. Doesn't catch anything. Remember when Jesus first talked to them when they were a little bit younger and they were just out there, and he's like, hey, boys, struggling out there, right? And at that time, he tells the guys, hey, you ought to fish in a little bit deeper area. Now, anybody here that's like has been an expert at where they work or whatever like that, that's just what you want, is some advice from some stranger off of, out of nowhere. Like, come on, man, what are you talking about, right? Here, Jesus says to them, like, hey, guys, did you try cast your net on the other side of the boat? Like, these boats, you're not that big. It's like, the water on the other side of the boat is kind of the same as the water on this. Like, it doesn't make any sense. But I think Jesus, in my opinion, I think this was sort of just Jesus being funny. And right away, they would have known whose voice that was. Like, oh, it's that character who told us how to fish 3 years ago. I think that's what I'm hearing. But anyway, picking up the story here, Peter, if you remember, dives in the water right away. As soon as they know it's Jesus, he dives in the water. I'm not sure. But Peter, guys, you have to appreciate that Peter is broken at this point. He blew it. You ever blow it with somebody so bad and you're almost nervous to see them again? And you're just kind of like, oh man, they have every right to chew me out. They have the right to throw a brick at me, really. Have you ever been there where you're just like, oh man, can you imagine Peter with Jesus? I disowned you, Jesus. I totally disowned you. Man, it breaks my heart to just think about it. So in John 21, this is where Jesus says to Peter, they'd finished breakfast. I feel like he finishes breakfast and kind of pulls Peter aside. You got to imagine Peter's like, oh boy. So when they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? And he said to him, yes, Lord. You know that I love you. And then he looked at him and he said, feed my lambs. And then he said again to second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And he said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And so Jesus said, shepherd my sheep. And he said to him a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter was grieved at this point because he had said to him a third time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And so Jesus said to him, tend my sheep. Precious story. Precious story. So three highlights from this, okay? The first one, just like Thomas's skepticism doesn't drive Jesus away or scare Jesus away or stop Jesus, Peter's betrayal doesn't stop Jesus from coming after him. Some of you need to hear that. Some of you have known that you blew it or something like that. Jesus is pursuing you, just like he did with Peter. I love that. Peter's denial, his betrayal, doesn't stop Jesus. Number two, once again, Jesus' questions. He questions Peter. Just like he did Mary, why are you crying? Just like he did with Adam and Eve back in the garden. Where are you hiding? Where are you at? He asks questions. This time three. Now look, scholars have been all over the map with why Jesus handled this way. The simplest way, seeing in black and white, is this idea of Peter denied him 3 times. Peter, in a sense, lied 3 times. This is a chance for Peter to profess the truth 3 times, to kill that lie, right? I mean, it's pretty clear. It's pretty clear. I think that third time when it says he was kind of grieved that he got asked the third time, if Peter didn't know already that Jesus had known about it, he now knows. And there had to have been something. He's like, I get it, Jesus. I get what you're doing. I think that's why he says to Jesus, you know all things. You know. But I'm going to say it anyway. Do you know that Jesus had already forgiven Peter before this conversation? You see what I'm saying? He asks Peter the questions so Peter can forgive himself, so he can speak the truth over the shame of what he's done. Some of you need to do that. Some of you need to do that. I believe Peter was already forgiven. If he hadn't, Jesus wouldn't have already cooked him some breakfast and asked to have a talk with him, right? Come on. But here's the other cool thing. Third highlight. Jesus doesn't just forgive Peter, but he says, feed my sheep 3 times. He reinstates Peter. You catch that? When Jesus forgives, he redeems, he reestablishes, he recovers, he recommissions, he reinstates. He doesn't just forgive and go, all right, we'll see how you handle this next time, and walk away. No, he gets Peter back in the game. Peter, you're back in the game. You are back to where you were, full scale. That's one of the differences between God's forgiveness and our forgiveness. God's forgiveness is to restore the rightness of what the relationship was pre your screw up. Often we just forgive, and the idea of when we forgive somebody, if we truly forgive somebody, and I think that this is what God expects, and I don't think it's wrong, but when we forgive somebody, the idea, not the forgive and forget part, I think that's silly. The forgiveness is for us a way of going, I release you from being labeled by me as that thing you did. You are not going to be that thing you did anymore to me. That's over. I feel, I've let it go and you're forgiven. God takes it a step further. And I remember this when things happened with my best friend, with the whole affair thing and everything. God showed me that the way God would forgive is not just to forgive a best friend, but to say we're best buddies again. Like there's a restoration of what you were pre-fall, if that makes sense. That's what's happening here. He is completely reinstating Peter, and I love that. I love that. Okay, so I told you guys 3 appearances, 1 no-show, right? So who's the no-show? Who's the no-show? Let me talk about it like this real quick. Do you guys ever wonder? Look, this is I watch too many like Braveheart style movies. Okay. You ever wonder if Jesus made some appearances to guys who would not have liked to see him again? I often wonder, might have Jesus shown up to the guy who was holding the whip? Might he have shown up to the guys who blindfolded him and punched him in the face? It's a place in my Bible I can hardly read without weeping. They punch him in the face and they rip out his beard. Could he have showed up to those guys? See, in my movie, he's showing up to those guys while they're sleeping and standing over their bed, I wonder if he showed up to the guys who nailed the nails into his hands and feet. But just the moment that I think about that and I start writing my movie and I start going, oh man, this is what I would have done. Jesus would have stood there with a sword or something and it would have been all over. Jesus corrects me and goes, if I did, I'd have forgiven every last one of them. When he's on the cross, he says, Father, forgive them for they know not what they're doing. Well, I want to tell you what, in my movie, if he shows up to those other guys, he ruins what I was thinking by saying, I'll forgive every last one of them. I just believe that. I believe that. So who's the no-show? Anybody want to take a guess? Judas. The no-show is Judas. Judas had a problem. Judas took things into his own hands all the time. Quite literally, because it says he used to take money from the treasury. So quite literally did he take things into his hand all the time. But he always did that. Some scholars believe that Judas's betrayal of Jesus was even to try to start a revolution. You need to understand the Jews had a different view of eschatology, their idea of end times and different things. Their big thing wasn't so much the way we think of like getting saved and one day we die and we go to heaven. That's not the way the typical Jew thought back then. They were thinking that when things all get right, it's going to be because God comes and executes his kingdom on all these bad Romans and everybody. Okay? It's also possible that Judas might have been a zealot, which those guys were sort of like, hey, we're not waiting around for this to happen. We're going to take the sword to them. It's hard to say. It's hard to say. The Bible doesn't say, so I'm not going to try to preach any of that at you. Regardless, we know what Judas did do. He sold Jesus out, betrayed him. But in my opinion, the reason I'm calling him the no-show today is had he not taken that one last step into his own hands and taken his life, and he would have been around, Jesus would have found him too and would have forgiven him too. Now, some of you may not, I know there's some serious anti-Judas people. I get that. I get that. But the Jesus I keep reading about, I think, would have showed up to Judas and figured out a way to make it right with him too, the way he did with Peter. I love that. So kind of getting ready to land the plane. What do these three appearances tell us? Well, one is Mary, is that he pursues the brokenhearted. If you're here this morning and you are brokenhearted, there's been something here, he is pursuing you. Now, I don't know how or what needs to happen for him to catch you, but I'm going to tell you, he's pursuing you. He is pursuing you. That's what my Jesus does. Two, there's a second one. The story of Thomas tells us he pursues the skeptic and the doubter. It's possible that that's who you are this morning. Maybe there's just some things you just having doubts, having some serious problems with stuff. Maybe you have a friend or a family member that has serious skepticism towards this whole thing. He's pursuing them. He's pursuing them. He's pursuing you. He's pursuing them. And three, the story of Peter tells us that he pursues the sinner, the one who's betrayed. He pursues the brokenhearted, he pursues the skeptic, and he pursues the sinner. Now, this is how we're going to conclude. This is what it should mean for us. This should give us boldness in two places. To engage and encounter him and to share our hearts with him, like I was telling you. He is bidding you to come and share your heart. Come and share your heart. He's pursuing you, maybe in one of those three places I just said, but share your heart with them. Share your heart with them. Take time to do that. And lastly, the last thing I'm going to say is this idea of him pursuing should give you boldness to reach out to people with the gospel. That person at work, maybe you've had a couple conversations with, maybe a family member you've had a couple conversations with. There should be something in your mind that since you know your Jesus is already pursuing them, you just got to be part of the game. You don't have to be the one that changes their mind or gets them completely saved or anything. You just go after somebody that Jesus is already after. Trusting Jesus is going to have to do the work. He's going to have to be the one that reaches the materialist, the one that needs some proof. You don't have to bring the proof. Jesus does, right? The person who's brokenhearted, you can't go out and fix somebody's broken heart. All you can kind of do is the whole, there. It'll be okay, right? Jesus is the one that comes and mends the heart. And then we all know about sinning. Probably all of us have been all three of these things. And we've been pursued, and it should give us boldness to pursue other people with Christ. So we're going to pray, and then we're done. And look at that, right at 12 o'clock. And then a lot of our pastors are gone, and Betty had to leave. Betty has a real important lunch date with her daughter that we could be praying about too. That's going to be, hopefully that's a God-ordained thing. But I still want to invite you to come to the front for prayer if you need. If you just need to talk to me, just wait for a minute, make sure nobody's needing some prayer. Other than that, you're dismissed. Gretchen's already getting bagels ready back there and all, so you guys can head back there. Or if you're going home, have a great afternoon, okay? But let's pray. Father, thank you for being a God who not only made us and created us, but then you just so long to have relationship with us. You long to hear from us. You long to have conversations with us. It's how you made us. And so, Lord, help us not to hold back. Help us not to be afraid to pray to you. Help us not to be afraid to share our hearts with you. You're the one who made our hearts. You're the one who heals our brokenness. You're the one who proves yourself to when we need proof. You're the one who has covered our sin and pursues us that way. And most of all, Lord, you're the one who gets us back in the game. You reinstate us into the purposes that you have made us to be. And we need that today, Lord. We need that. So we thank you for all that you're doing, Lord. We thank you so much for this church. Oh boy, you're just awesome. You're just awesome, Lord. Help us have a good week this week and stay safe till we all meet again together. In Jesus' precious name.